there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. I set up the show earlier with with clips of the end of the Amy Coney Barrett hearing. And I want to get into the town halls last night and, talk about how that maybe have changed a little bit of the narrative, but I don't think it did, really, to be honest with you. But there are a couple of things that changed in terms of where Joe Biden sits. But I want to look a little past the election at first, right, to a struggle that I think we're going to see. I mean, there was a piece in Politico today by Alex Thompson. AOC House progressives warn Biden on corporate hires. Now, this to me sounds like whenever you read something in Politico, right, there's always like you're seeing the shadow of something, it seems to me. Stories like this, I should say, right, which is somebody wants a narrative out there right now.
Right.
That they think is going to help their cause. And the nature of this story is that is a little bit of like, people are worried that the left may be getting out ahead of their skis on this, et cetera, et cetera. It reads a little bit like there's an argument that maybe the left should trim their sails in pushing Biden. Now, of course, the reality is everyone's pushing Biden. Everybody's trying to get a seat at the table, and everybody's trying to get their personnel in to define what Joe Biden does as president, if that happens. And there's two different dispositions towards a lot of this in terms of the Republicans, broadly speaking, which I think was evidence between those two clips I just played, one between White House and Dianne Feinstein. Give me your sense of how this is shaking out to the extent that we can see it, right? Because a lot of this is sort of obscured from public view right now, and obviously is secondary to the actual election. But these are the things, people remember what happened with Obama in 2008.
Yes. Yeah. No, I remember that. That's the thing I remember the most was one of his first hires who was Timothy Geithner over at Treasury. And that's when I knew the jig was up, right? All the hope and change kind of died inside of me at that moment. But we have the full expectation. I think the left, we have the full expectation that this is the direction that a Biden administration is going to go. And I agree with you. This is secondary to November 3rd, right? We would rather fight neoliberalism than neo-fascism. But we do understand what we're getting. I like the way that you put it. Like, this is perhaps in the political piece, they're trying to tell us to get in line already. But the thing is, we're coming with a totally different attitude. I can't speak on behalf of AOC or anybody else on the left, obviously. But I think there's a general sentiment on the left is that we're going to do you guys a solid. We're going to do America a solid. We're going to help you get rid of the fascists that your policies, quite frankly, help bring into power. But once we've done that, please understand that you're next. We're coming for you. You can give us a seat at the table if you like. That's fine. But we're coming to take the table in the long run. But we do realize that right now, all hands on deck to get rid of Donald Trump.
And I think that captures it quite a bit. And you mentioned Geithner, and it was, I think, like after the fact that we realized that one of his key transition figures was this guy Froman, who ended up being his top trade negotiator and was the one who was developing the PPP. And I don't know, it feels like a million years ago, but and PPP was of the myriad of reasons why Hillary Clinton lost, Barack Obama pushing the PPP so heavily towards the end of his administration was certainly something that cost Hillary Clinton in some ways. I mean, we know there was a huge cauldron of reasons,
TPP,
and it's hard to disaggregate. But Froman had a list, and Froman, I should say, was a former Citibank executive. He was a Robert Rubin acolyte, and had a list that was generated presumably amongst his, that group of people as to who Barack Obama should be putting into positions. And, I can't remember when the reporting came out on that list. It was years later. And it was almost a one-to-one relationship between that list generated out of Citibank and who was going to fill a lot of the major cabinet positions and sub-cabinet positions, I should say, in the Obama administration. So this is what's so weird about this, Ben. This is a hugely important time. Like right now, in the run up to the election, of course, first order issue is get rid of Donald Trump. But the thing is that there is a whole host of people who are working on the second order issue and who have the luxury, literally, or the resources to do that. And everything that's happening literally right now in terms of the Biden transition team, and that's going to happen starting November 4th. I mean, knock on wood, or November 8th, knock on wood, or November 10th, or, God help us, January 19th. I mean, there is a transition that is going on that is going to define what happens in the first 2 years of the Biden presidency. And we know from experience with Obama that is the one where you're going to see the most change. We know we saw it with Trump too. That's when the major tax cuts passed. To the extent that there is going to be any major signature legislation that is passed, it's going to happen during that era, that first couple of years. And these are the people who are going to sit in there. And we have no access to it. I mean, it's sort of very frustrating in some way. We don't have the ability to push that right now.
Right. One thing I want to point out, though, Sam, is I agree with what you're saying, but I think it's important that we start looking at this in terms of holistic cycles. We were caught off guard by Obama's administration those first 2 years. Matter of fact, the first 2 weeks. We had more expectations of his administration than we probably should have. But no, let me correct that. We were right to have those expectations. But the position that we were in, we didn't have the institutional power that we have now. We don't have as much as we need, the left, progressives, but we sure as hell have a whole lot more than we had in 2008. And so I think we're in a kind of semi-power position. We're not able to call the shots, but it would be folly for them to keep the more progressive wing of the party at bay in favor of, let's say, the Lincoln Project style Republicans who are going to need to find a new home. It would be extremely foolhardy for them to do that, because it's not as though we're going to be left out in the cold. It's not as though them isolating us from this process and from those positions and from that influence silences us. Oh, no, it just gives us more ammunition to bring them hell. And I'm quite frankly really excited about that, because I've been quiet for the last 5 months or however long this journey has been. And I've got a lot to say, and so do so many other people. They should negotiate with us because they should want to bring us in versus have us on the outs.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I watched what happened in that Senate hearing at the end yesterday. This is at the end of the Amy Coney Barrett hearing, and there was a lot of soliloquies, by the senators. And then we had this thing with Ben Sasse yesterday, where he leaks out. I mean, this was not by accident that we know this, where Ben Sasse is trying to distance himself. There is a feeling that I got when I watched that stuff, that sort of like sickly feeling that I had from years ago, that you have elements of the Democratic Party who are already trying to build coalitions with Republicans across the table. And the Republicans are doing it because they need to reform themselves after what they have done over the past more years, but certainly this past 4 years have been reprehensible. And they need to reform themselves. And you see the Democrats not just giving them a life preserver, but also building coalitions as a way of blocking and needing the progressive wing less, right? I mean, because this is about addition in many respects. And, I'm looking at this political story, and the difference, you're right. I mean, there's two differences, it seems to me, between 2020 and 2008. And that is, in 2008, we didn't have an AOC. We didn't have something like Justice Democrats who were challenging primary challenges. We didn't have, what happened in 2018, where you knocked off a couple of, and by AOC, I mean, not just what she's saying, but what she represents in terms of a challenge to the Democratic leadership. And like you say, we didn't have the skepticism of Obama. That is,
you're naive.
I mean, it couldn't be more the opposite at this point, right? I mean, it's like everyone is voting for Joe Biden with their eyes wide open, with the lowest of expectations and with the highest expectations that we need to engage. And remember, the Obama campaign had completely neutered all the outside groups to the extent that they existed. With that, they basically told all their donors, you don't give to these outside groups.
Right.
You give to us and we handle it. And so this is a very different time. And I think just even like pointing out this stuff creates a certain pressure on Biden at all.
Yeah. No, I did two totally different episodes this week. One episode, I was kind of disillusioned, and I'm like, we're going to have to play an even longer game. We may be on the outs, talking about progress in general, the Democratic Party in general, in context of Amy Coney Barrett. Like, maybe we should be projecting 30 or 40 years out. But then the next day it came to me in a conversation I was having with Jonathan Smucker, who's an activist, that we really we're on the ascendancy here. Like, we can't take it for granted. We can't belittle this or look down on the fact that, we lost two primaries back to back, but they had to throw themselves on their swords, the neoliberal wing. They had to throw themselves on their swords in order to stop us in 2020. And so as bleak as this looks, there are people in positions of power with fundraising capacity, with larger fundraising capacity than some of the top Democrats in this country, with a larger email list than the top Democrats in this country, with larger media platforms than all the Democrats in this country, that we're just simply waiting for them to act stupid because we really have it out for them. In a way that they can't imagine. We would rather work with them. No, that's not even true. Some of us are waiting to fight them. So it would behoove them to catch us on the ascendancy and make some changes if they want moderate changes, because we're coming for progressive change, whether they like it or not.
Let's play this clip from, like I say, the two town halls last night, the dueling town halls. And apparently more people watched the Joe Biden town hall than Donald Trump, which I think really must hurt Donald Trump's feelings.
Donald Trump. Yeah.
But look, we went into this last night with the narrative of Donald Trump is a raving lunatic and Joe Biden is not Donald Trump, right? I mean, that's the proposition from the Biden campaign in many respects. Yeah. And I think if you look at the coverage and you look at what happened in these town halls, that's basically what everybody came out of it with.